that Ireland at the time was, and still is to a large degree, an agrarian country. Okay, and people made their living by farming. Well, the smaller your plot is, the less able you are to lead a prosperous life. So you had a small house to keep your rent down, and trying to hang on to what piece of land that you could. And housing became an issue at different times. At about the time of the famine, the landlords all across Ireland were having a lot of difficulties, and many of them were what were called absentee landlords. They may have had a domain house, a large, nice mansion on their property, but they would go and live back in London or wherever they were from in England and leave the estate in the hands of somebody in Ireland. So they weren't necessarily directly there managing, or not all of them were there directly managing things. And these large estates didn't pay enough to support the lifestyle that these folks wanted to live. They were in London partying, living a good life, a high life. Hey, I've got an estate in Ireland, I'm somebody. And they spent more than their lands were bringing in. And the other problem is that once the potato took root in Ireland, more people survived to reproduce. And so population got to be a problem. So it hindered the development of the land from the landlord's perspective to have all of these little cottiers with all of their little potato patches and whatnot around, where he might prefer to have far fewer people and more cattle, or whatever his crop was, so that he could make money on the estate. But it wasn't happening that way. These people were there, and they were native to the land, and it was difficult to get rid of them. But that was one thing that many wanted to do. They wanted to clear their lands and make them more economically productive. And Lucas, can you go ahead and put that CD in? So house and home is an issue. People were sometimes evicted if they couldn't keep up with the rent, or if the landlord happened to want to take, repossess a. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and put it on pause for a second. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had put it in already. So there's this song, and the Irish are good for their music, of course, and it's often very lively. But there's also a. Thank you. It's also a melancholy strain of Irish music as well. So as the famine hit Ireland, or the most well-known famine hit Ireland in 1847, it became something of an opportunity for some landlords. They saw it as an opportunity to clear their lands, and they used different means to do this. Sometimes they just kicked people out of their house, which is what this song we'll play here in a second talks about. Other times, other landlords paid passage for their tenants to find their way to America. There were all different kinds of approaches taken. And this is just a song. We'll play it through. Irish music is rich in meaning and the history and the story of Ireland. So when you hear an Irish tune, it's sometimes worthwhile to listen. I know that I've learned a lot through the music, as well as by reading. This is the Loch Sheelan Eviction.
For I'm forced to sail o'er the the ocean wide, from my cottage home, by ocean side. Early cloud was I, oh, my care so tall, I was envied most by the young men all. When I brought her blushing, a bashful bride, to my cottage home, by ocean side. But all our joys were too good to last, for the landlord came our young hopes to blast. And when we pleaded for mercy, no, he heard our salute in the blinding snow. Not one might open to us the door, or else his vengeance would reach them sure. My hiding fainted in my arms and died on that fearful night by ocean side. Where I glittered down the churchyard when in the springtime sweet daisies grow. I shed no tears, for the font had dried, and my hiding lay by ocean side. Farewell, companion, farewell to all. The ship will soon take me far away, but my fond heart will still abide near my hiding place by ocean side.
So this is for many Irish who came here. You know, this sort of story was you know was close to home. Thinking about my own mother, who was, you know, a couple of generations removed from the initial immigrant. I was thinking back a long time ago. But one of the phrases she used to use with my sisters and I was. She would tell us to go outside and blow the stink off. And, as a kid, and you know, when you look at a house, you know, when I look at this picture, and you picture 10 or 12 kids, you know, a wood fire going with wood smoke and whatnot, and mom doesn't want the kids, you know, bugging her while she's inside or whatever. You know, you can just picture. I'm guessing that phrase may have come down through her Irish line. I know her wooden spoon. So when the Irish arrived in the Lewiston and Auburn area in the late 40s and in 1850, as we spoke of last week, they came in 1847 building the first railroad into the area, and then in 1850 more of them were brought up to dig the canals for the proposed mill complex on the Lewiston side. And this is a picture I found in the Sun Journal from the newspaper 1900, and it says familiar landmark, the Cape Horgan House Lower Lincoln Street, Lewiston. And so you might see some similarities between that dwelling and that dwelling. Now, again, still small, narrow. The difference is that here wood was the readily available and cheapest material, whereas there they had plenty of stone to build from. Okay, so what is a patch? And it was really interesting discovering all of these patches. When you actually get on the ground and walk these places, it isn't terribly hard to imagine back, to time well before there were cars. And so an Irish patch. The Irish lived all over Lewiston and Auburn. You look at some of the old maps, you'll see Irish names just all over the place. But they did have 6 very distinct neighborhoods called patches, and an Irish patch was usually on company land. Okay, the Franklin Company is what you'll probably hear most today if you've heard about it. The predecessor to the Franklin Company was the Lewiston Water Power Company. Okay, so those two names, it's basically the same company. But they owned most of Lewiston and large chunks of Auburn as well. And when the Irish workers came, there wasn't any place for them to live. This was a very remote farming village, or a couple of farming villages. And there really wasn't much of a place for them to live. So they set up shop and set up a hut. And the oral tradition I've heard is that the initial shelters were very crude dugouts. Perhaps in the side of a hill until they got enough money to get something more substantial built, like Kate Horrigan's house, and then eventually nicer houses like these. But it was on company land. They did not own the land. And one of the interesting things is that these patches are still on company land. It's still Franklin Company land. It's except with some exceptions. But so that's kind of interesting. And it's usually marginal land. Land that the company wasn't immediately planning to use, and it might be in the neighborhood of some unpleasant smelling or noisy industrial facility where other people, with money probably wouldn't buy, wouldn't want to live. Might be on a very steep hillside that would be more difficult to build on, and of course more difficult on a daily basis to get to and fro wherever you're going to. So other people with money wouldn't build on the steep hillside. The Irish did, because they could do so cheaply. One of the other characteristics of these patches as you walk them today, the houses, as you can tell here, this is the lower half of Strawberry Patch. The houses aren't lined up, they aren't faced on the street. Oftentimes, it's a little bit better today because houses have been replaced over the years, but when you look at the old maps, they didn't much care how the house was oriented. They picked a spot, they built it so you've got houses facing this way, next to houses facing that way, and it was really, patch is really a good description of what it was. It was a somewhat wild setup. It was not planned. It was not organized. You also see that in the street. And this is a fairly short section of street, and it's all over the place. And that's again because the street was not planned. It evolved from usage. Wherever they happen to drive the carts, and of course, as you plant all these houses all over the place, the cart has to go around them, and so you get these winding, curvy streets. And even today, it's not very wide. I mean, it's many modern cars would have are a really tight fit going down that street and some of the other patches.
Where would that be?
That's on Merton Boulevard, just off of outer Lincoln Street, almost to River Street. Yeah. It's a series of 2. Yeah, well, it's a little loop off the side. Yeah. And we'll look at that some more in a moment.